Gotta make it fast. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be going over some recommendations for shorter or fast-paced books. Specifically, this came from, I did a live stream on Saturday, and Scott had asked in there for recommendations of shorter, fast-paced books to kind of fit in between all of the many chunky fantasy books that there are. So I threw out some things there. Some of those will be repeats. Some of these are additional things that I have added in. But wanted to go through just some books that are a bit quicker to get through and talk through as well, because I thought this seemed like a good idea for a video. So thanks, Scott, for asking that question on the live stream. But let's jump into it. So I think he did specifically ask about newer books, and this is definitely a mix of new and old. A few of them have been out for quite some time, and some haven't been as well. I just have stacks here, so this is going to be no particular order, but we will just get started. So first up, with probably the oldest book here, is Legend by David Gemmell. This is the first book in the Drenai saga, and it chronicles our main character, Druss the Legend, and he's much later in his life and has already done all of these legendary heroic things, but there is a city that's getting ready to just be completely overrun by just a horde of enemies, and he is expected to come in and try to prevent it, even though it seems like the odds are completely insurmountable. This was, especially for a debut, something that's older, really surprised me, and I really enjoyed it. I've been meaning to continue reading Gemmell's books. I have several others, and I haven't gotten into it yet, but the Drenai saga in general are not particularly long. This is under 400 pages. Yeah, under 400 pages does mean it's not long for the purpose of this, because there's a few that are longer, but it also is extremely fast-paced, and there's really no fluff here. I actually thought this could have dealt with being a little bit longer because it moved so quickly. So this is definitely a fast-paced one I would recommend. Another one I thought I would bring up is The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. Sanderson is incredibly popular, obviously, and a lot of his books are quite long, though. So this one is a novella, and I have heard a lot of people say that this is actually one of their favorite Sanderson things. I don't agree with that for me personally, but this is a really good story. It is very quick. I read this in one sitting when I originally read it. I read it on, I think it was a digital read when I first had it, before I even had Kindle, and I found this copy later. But this is pretty short. It's very well written, and it's very much a complete story. You also do not need any sort of knowledge of the Cosmere to read this, even though it does take place in the Cosmere. There are a few weird kind of reference things at the end that you probably wouldn't get, but it's obscure enough that it does not at all take away from the enjoyment of this. But this follows a main character whose name I can't remember, Shy. I say it's been a long time since I read this, but Shy, and she has the power of forging, and where basically she can like create copies of things, and she is tasked with what should be impossible: forging the Emperor, creating basically a new version of the Emperor, because the Emperor, I believe, has died, and she has to do this within a certain amount of time, and so it follows her attempting to do that. Very short and fast, a good one to get through. So the next thing I thought I'd bring up is a trilogy by Mark Lawrence, and I have here the Broken Empire trilogy. Now, the Red Queen's War trilogy are also not overly long and pretty fast-paced. Lawrence is pretty popular, and I still have only read these 6 books, including the Red Queen's War trilogy. I haven't read his newer, more popular stuff, actually. But the first book especially is very short. I read this in pretty much a day. And then the other 2 get a little bit longer, but are still, I'm pretty sure all of these do clock in under 400. I lied, King of Thorns barely makes it over 400, but they're still fairly quick reads, and both trilogies, and are a lot of fun, and a lot of not fun too. But the Broken Empire trilogy follows Jorg, or Jorg. I always said Jorg in my head, but I think everybody else says Jorg, so probably Jorg. And he is starting in the first book. He is the Prince of Ancraft, and he is on a quest for power where nothing's going to stand in his way. This is definitely grimdark. Red Queen's War is probably slightly less grimdark than this. Has a lot more humor too. But these were really enjoyable books. I enjoyed both series quite a lot. So definitely ones that I recommend. I think most people are familiar with this, and some people didn't like Jorg. You do really need to read this to get the most out of the Red Queen's War, though, but you probably could read it on its own, but it takes place concurrently, so it definitely works better if you do this one first. So if you're looking for a series that has shorter books that you can get through a bit quicker, that is a good one, I would say. So next up I'll mention is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This is, it's a novella. You may call it a book. You could consider it a book. It's pretty short. And I also read this pretty much in one sitting for the most part because I barely could put it down either. But this is it's definitely not fast-paced, but it's short, and it just tells a really great story in such a short amount of time. And this follows a man who is returning to the town from his childhood for a funeral, and then he has these like really vivid memories of things that happened as a child in the way he saw them as a child. So it has this kind of dual storytelling where you can see what's going on, even though it's a bit different from how he saw it at the time when he was a child. And I really, really loved this. I should mention, too, for everything I've talked about so far, each book except for Emperor's Soul, I do have a review for. So I probably won't actually link them all, but you can search for any of these books besides Emperor's Soul and on my channel, and you will find a review that I've done for them. So, keeping the Gaiman train running, we have Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. This is, I think, slightly longer. It still clocks in under 400, and this I did find very quick. And most people seem to enjoy this book. I loved it. It was so much fun. The TV show is great too, and like the book and the show both just make each other better. Because I definitely loved. I saw the show first, and then I read the book, and then I ended up watching the show again, and I just appreciated it more. Both are fantastic and really fun, and this is not an overly long one. I will note that it does have really weird like chapter setups. It's set into days, not necessarily chapters. So there are some passages that are really, really long without chapter breaks, which is probably Terry Pratchett's fault because he's really bad about not having chapters. But this follows, we have basically an angel and a demon who are trying to both do their part in the end of the world, and things get a little bit muddied when they're on Earth for a long time and realize they like being on Earth and don't really want to go back to heaven and hell, respectively. So much fun, really enjoyable book. Since I just got done talking about Pratchett and weird chapter structure, I have to mention Discworld, because Discworld, all of the books are very fast-paced for the most part. Most of them are not particularly long, even the ones that are a bit longer, like Small Gods is almost 400 pages, but at least in the copies I have, the print is usually pretty decently sized. Sometimes it's even bigger, it just kind of depends. But these are very quick to get through, and these are my favorite thing to use as like palate cleanser books. I am holding these three specifically because these are, from what I've read so far, some of my favorites. The first one being Weird Sisters. This is the second Witches book, so you should probably read Equal Rights first, but this is, out of the Witches books that I've read so far, besides Lords and Ladies might have taken over, but I really, really loved this one. This follows Granny Weatherwax and the other witches, and has a lot of Shakespeare parody in it, is kind of the base plot, including some great scenes where Granny Weatherwax does not understand that a play is not real, and that she's not watching events actually happen before her, but be acted out. It was a lot of fun. Lords and Ladies was Shakespeare too, and Witches Abroad was the one between, which I liked less, but it was still good. A less good Discworld book is still worth usually many other books. Guards, which I can't imagine you haven't heard of, because almost anyone who recommends Discworld will tell you Guards. I originally started with Color of Magic, didn't care for it. The first couple books are a bit rough. Equal Rights, the third one, was good though, but I ended up reading Guards first and then going back to Pub Order. This is just a fun book in general. This is also one of the longer ones, which is still not particularly long, but is just a fantastic book. This is following the City Watch, Carrot and Captain Vines and the rest of the crew, and has just a ton of kind of like guard tropes that it's kind of parodying, and also a lot of other stuff, commentary in there as well, is really fun. Small Gods is probably the most narratively sound and more of a serious narrative than the rest that I've gotten to so far, but still was really great, had a lot of humor, and just was really enjoyable. This, for me, was the really big moment where it seems like he is working on going more with narrative structure. Still a ton of humor, but some of the other books are just mostly there for the parody, less so for the story. Small Gods really changed that too, and so it's one that I definitely quite enjoyed. That one also is a standalone, so you don't have to have read any of the others. There's some like little Easter eggs that you'll get if you have, but you don't have to have read any of the others for that one. Next up is Weavers by John Walker. And I've talked about this book a few times before, but this is, for me, the rare YA novel that I actually really enjoyed. This is Walker, he has a channel, Walker Writes 7, which I'll link below. And he had originally contacted me about this forever ago. And I read it, and I was so afraid I wasn't going to because I don't like YA a ton, but I actually really enjoyed this quite a lot. And it's very fast-paced and very quick to read. So fits this perfectly, but this follows a group of teenagers who, while are in high school, it's not like a teenager's high school story. It is specifically kind of just following them in their own lives with the events around them, with the bigger overall story being that they are weavers who can weave certain elements, and there's kind of an overarching plot of basically how regular people treat weavers and kind of fringe groups that are looking to cause problems. So this was a really enjoyable book, and I don't typically read YA, so that's why I think this is the only thing that's probably technically YA out of these. But I imagine there are a lot of other quick YA books, but this is one that I actually really enjoyed, so I can definitely recommend. Others I don't know so much because it's not something I read that much. Something that's definitely not YA, and a big one to mention, is the Obsidian Path series by Michael R. Fletcher. I very recently finished She Dreams of Blood, and I'd read Black Stone Heart a bit ago. These both are very quick, very fast-paced, and easy to get through, and just were so good. This is probably falls under Grimdark. Pretty much everything Fletcher writes falls under Grimdark. But these were just, it's such an interesting story. You follow a man basically who wakes up in a shallow grave and has really no memories of who he is, figuring out how life works, and then finding out who he was in the past. And then we slowly reveal more and more as he regains more memories of himself, which happens when he finds either other versions of himself or pieces of obsidian that form up pieces of his heart, hence Blackstone Heart. And so he's finding more and more about who he was and trying to figure out who he wants to be. Really great story, really great action. There's the mystery elements. There's a lot of kind of philosophical commentary and exploration of a character study, looking at him and like good versus evil, the greater good. You know, is it your memories that make you who you are, or are you who you are based on the choices you make, etc. Really interesting and just gripping. And these are books that I get through even faster than the page count would merit because they're hard to put down. So also fantastic, shorter books that are quite a lot of fun. And so lastly, the one I'll mention is Dragon Slayer by Duncan M. Hamilton. So this is one that I was not nearly as high on as most of the books that I have talked about. It was still really solid, but this one I do still want to mention. I haven't read the other two yet. It is part of a trilogy. It is really good if you're kind of just looking for something very light, very easy fantasy-wise. This follows the classic fantasy trope of the like ex-hero is now a drunk and has to come back and slay the dragon. It's literally called Dragon Slayer. It literally describes itself that way. And this is one, though, I will say, it's not trying to pretend it's something else. It is very self-aware of the fact that it's a book that is following a well-known trope, and that's what it's done. And it does it really well. It does throw in a few unique things also, but it's one of those books that knows it's a trope, and it's okay with that. And I don't know if in the other two it's going to depart from that more. Maybe that was just the starting off point. But this was a really quick read. This is also, it's only about 300 pages long, which for a fantasy book does count as a short book once again, I have to keep saying. So I get only 300-400 pages, it's not that long. Well, for fantasy, it's not that long. But this is just really simple. If you're just looking for something that's just easy, that's not going to tax you, that's just something familiar, this would probably be good for you. It's really not trying to be anything other than that, and so I think it accomplishes what it set out for. So, those are some shorter book recommendations. Let me know in the comments what are some shorter books that you would recommend. And I'm always interested to hear. I feel like I need more short books in my life. And so that's why some of these are ones I did more recently, and it was just so nice to read something shorter. So I definitely get the need. I will give an honorable mention, because I mentioned it in the live stream, to Faithful and the Fallen, which are not short books, but they read like short books. And I actually used those, which are all around 600 pages, but they read like 300-page books. But I used those between Robin Hobb and Kate Elliott books when I needed something faster paced, because they are definitely fast paced and just kind of move. But yeah, those are some shorter book recommendations that I have for you. Like I said, let me know yours. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Check the link in the description for the Wizardly Duo Discord if you want to join and chat books, get other book recommendations, or just kind of chat in general. We'd love to have you there to join us. And of course, if you'd like to see more of my content, make sure to subscribe.